When Steve Jobs was still around, Apple had a vision. It had a plan. When Steve was around, they were less likely to keep on old products and bring in new ones. When the new ones came out, the old products were history. This meant that the older, going out product was not the cheaper, more entry-level product. Well, it could be, but you had to buy it at resale. You wouldn't buy it directly from Apple. Steve Jobs was the type of guy that preferred to consolidate their products. And Jason, if you're watching this, that one was for you. But for real, it's true. Steve Jobs was the type of guy who wanted to make less products and sell more of them. Apple was the iPhone. It was the iMac, and it was the iPod. But now it just seems like it's kind of different. We have the MacBook Air with the M1, the MacBook Air with the M2, the MacBook Pro with the M2, the MacBook Pro with the M1, and even the MacBook Pro-ers with the M1 Max and M1 Pro chip. But that's not it. There's also the iPad and the iPad, but with a larger screen this time. The iPad mini, the iPad Air, two different sizes for the iPad Pro. And then there's the iPhones, which get more confusing. There's the iPhone Plus, the iPhone Pro, the Pro Max. For a couple years there was a mini, but they got rid of that one. And honestly, they'll probably get rid of the plus size model going forward too, because it's selling just as bad as the mini did. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. It is cool that there's an option for anybody. But it does seem like here lately, Apple has made some really weird decisions and they seem a little confused. Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Grason, this is Tech With Me, and today I wanted to talk about Apple. Now, don't get me wrong guys, I'm not an Apple hater. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty deep into their ecosystem. Not only did I write the script for this video on my M2 MacBook Pro, but I also edit a majority of my videos on it. I'm also daily driving an iPhone 13 Pro. I use an Apple Watch literally every day, and if I'm listening to music, 9 times out of 10, it's on my AirPods Pros. I'm gonna be honest, I even use an Apple TV streaming box on 2 out of my 3 TVs at home. With that being said, Apple has made some odd decisions lately, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about it. The MacBook Pro M2 is fairly well reviewed. It performs similarly, if not better, than the M1 MacBook Pro, but there is one common complaint about it. Just a few short months before the M2 MacBook Pro came out, Apple redesigned what the MacBook looks like. It had less bezels and more screen real estate. Sure, it had a notch, but it was a look that screamed Apple, and it looked really good. They also brought back ports. In a largely non-Apple fashion, they brought back I/O, such as the HDMI ports and the SD card slots. They added MagSafe back for charging, which opened up the USB-C ports. This was a huge move for them, and it got people excited. They also announced the M1 Pro and the M1 Max chips. These performed astronomically better than the already phenomenal performance of the base model M1 chip. And then later they announced the new MacBook Air. It had the M2 chip in it. It had the new redesigned screen with the notch. It had the newer MacBook Pro design, but in a MacBook Air, and it was cool. And then they announced the newest entry-level MacBook Pro. It had the M2 chip in it, but that's where things kind of started to get weird. It had the same touch bar. It had the same display. It even had the same lack of ports. As a matter of fact, it was basically the M1 MacBook Pro with the M2 processor hot swapped in it. Sure, a few short months before, it would have been a welcome addition to the lineup, and it would have been really well received. But by the time that they announced it, Apple had already made the changes. They had already changed the design, they had added the notch, they had brought back the ports, stuff had changed, and it wasn't the same climate as it had been a few months before. It was too late. They had already changed, and the MacBook Pro M2 hadn't. It was just more of the same, and that just didn't make a lot of sense. Why would they do this when they had already changed a majority of their lineup? Sure, it makes sense from a business decision. If they had a bunch of the leftover chassis still left over, why not reuse them? But from a consumer's perspective, it just didn't. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of the touch bar. I wish they had left it in the MacBook Proers, albeit still have the function keys that they have, but I wish they would have kept the touch bar. And the thing is even the touch bar couldn't save the M2 MacBook Pro. Next, they released the iPad 10.9. It was cool, but it was nothing crazy. It was just made to replace the iPad 10.2 that had the design that was honestly a few years out of date. The iPad 10.9 had a new design. It was reminiscent of the iPad Pros. It made a similar change in the way that the Minis and the iPad Airs had done previously. But that's where some of the oddness begins with the newest iPad release. It had a USB-C port, just like all of the other iPads did. But it still used the Generation 1 Apple Pencil. Yeah, that's just how it sounds. The newest iPad release, which used USB-C for charging, didn't support the newer Gen 2 Apple Pencil. It still only supported the Generation 1 Apple Pencil, which used Lightning for charging. And yeah, the Generation 1 Apple Pencil does now come with a Lightning to USB-C adapter to make it work, but it still just doesn't make a lot of sense. On top of that, the iPad 10.9's price raised from $329 to $450, and the changes between the two are minimal. And then to top it all off, Apple kept the 10.2-inch iPad as the entry-level iPad in their lineup, a move that in the past they wouldn't have done. Used to, it was out with the old and in with the new, but now it just seems like it's in with the old and in with the new. Apple has so many different options nowadays that it can be hard to make a decision on which one would work best for you. For example, why would I get the 10.9-inch iPad versus the 10.2 other than the new design? Everything else is very, very similar. It has a little bit of a faster processor, a slightly better and bigger display, but it uses the same Apple Pencil, and performance-wise is very, very close to the same for over $100 more. Why does an iPad that looks like a worse iPad Air and has similar performance to an iPad 10.2 cost over $100 more? Apple just seems really confused here lately, or maybe they are making big moves that'll make sense in the future. I guess that's just up to us to wait and see, but for now, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Apple has made some weird decisions here lately, but at the end of the day, their products do tend to work, and they do tend to work well. There is no arguing a lack of quality when it comes to Apple's product. But what do you guys think about these decisions here lately? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to talk about it, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys very, very kindly for watching. My name is Grayson, and this is Tech with Me.